Okay, so in this painting video, I'm going to be going through Kitsune, the demon, fox demon, and Altaua, which is the frost elemental construct. Now, I originally posted this video straight onto YouTube, but for some reason, I still don't know why, it didn't record any sound. So apologies about that if you watched that before I took it down. So I've re-edited it, and now I'm going to basically voice over this painting live stream. I've also fast forwarded a few little bits as well, just to make the video a little bit shorter. So this is Altaua, which is Altaua. I don't know how to. I still don't know how to pronounce that. And as you can see, it's a really nice deep blue that we can see on the to show ice. Which is brilliant for Talassar Blue, which is one of the contrast paints. So I'm just talking here that, you know, the modelling on these miniatures is just brilliant, and you can really tell the kind of where those icicles are, where the hard parts are in terms of ice, and where the darkness of the deep blue. Which is really, really nice. Now, Kitsune, or Kyubi no Kitsune, is such an awesome sculpt. Probably one of my favourites on the box. And I really wanted to paint her up. She's kind of a humanoid, because she's got skin. But she's got her 5 foxtails as well. I'm just talking about the fact that you don't need many paints for these two. Especially the Altaua, only a few, not including the metalwork, of course. I haven't included metalwork with those paints. And I will start to put in the description of these painting videos all of the contrast paints I've used, which is what I did. And I need to update that with some of the Super Fantasy Brawl ones as well, so I will get back to that. So, Apothecary White is the first one. Always start with the lighter colours, then move to the darker colours. I'm just saying this is what I did with Ezio. And the white really did work on this miniature. So he was my first miniature I painted, and I'm going to make my way through a number of these miniatures. I will do some live streaming of some and real-time videos of others. And we're going to crack straight onto the tail using this Apothecary White. Now, it's quite important to be relatively liberal with this Apothecary White, because the detail in this model and the kind of recesses, they're really, really strong. So to get that really nice contrast look, I'm using it pretty liberally onto that. For the 5 tails, as you can see, just using my Winsor Newton Series 7 size 0 brush again, as I do for most of the painting, I do. And now I'm going to speed it up. So this is 4 times speed, just to obviously get to the next point on this one. So 5 tails, doing that, and just making sure I'm picking up any pooling which might have occurred on any of the tails. We don't want it like absolutely ridiculous amounts of paint, especially on the top side of the tail. That wouldn't look correct. Okay. So that's why I'm brushing away any pooling effects at this point now. Okay, after that it's just a face mask to do white. And putting it on at first, I put a bit too much paint on the brush. So here I'm just making sure it's not pooled too much on the face mask. Now, as always, as I mentioned on my other videos, when you use Apothecary White at first, it looks quite grey, really quite dark grey, but it does dry a lot lighter. It gives such a good effect. Now I'm just looking at the art on the card, and it's metalwork on the head. I thought it might be the white on the head dress there, but it's actually metalwork. Okay, so with Kitsune finished on that stage of the white, and the beauty of doing 2 miniatures, it means you can let one dry while you do the other. So this is Talassar Blue. I haven't shown the blue pot here, I don't think. but it's Talassar Blue, which is a very vibrant blue. Unfortunately, the lid does not stay open again. So another Citadel pot lid that's really annoying. And you'll notice as soon as I put this on, how nice and vibrant, and how much it is like the art on the card, that blue. So I'm going to paint the bottom half first. So let's speed this up. I pushed back the lid and I managed to get it working. So, so at least it does work eventually. Being careful not to go over the base. It doesn't matter too much. You can touch up any bits of the base that you have to paint over with a bit of Wraithbone base. But just covering that leg with a coating of the blue. Now, to get the kind of ice effect, that kind of weaker effect on the blue, I'm gonna go in with some contrast medium, and just placing and just going over some of the protruding icicles, and it's just going over the top and just running the brush over a few times after applying the medium. And the medium acts a bit like water with contrast paints, so it's a really nice way of watering down that paint. Take the paint off with your brush, making sure you clean your brush as well regularly, especially before you put it into the contrast medium. You don't want to contaminate that with different colours. And just keep working across those protruding parts. And this is rather than doing a kind of highlight, and I feel that I wanted a kind of a more water and ice effect. Then if I dry brushed this with white, it would look a bit, what's the best way to say it? It would look a bit stone effect rather than a water effect, a wet effect like ice is. So that's why I decided to opt for the medium and using that. And basically what I'm doing, what I tend to do is paint a whole area with the Talassar Blue, and then before it completely dries, I go in with the medium to do the effects. So here you can see, again, sped up 4 times speed. We are covering, and you know, the vast majority of this miniature is this ice. So it's a fair amount to paint, admittedly. Just finishing up, making sure I've done that whole leg. Right, now it's back onto the medium, and then doing the same effect on that. And you can see that they're starting to get a bit lighter in those parts. It just gives such a nice effect. Kind of exactly what I'm looking for. I guess the best way to think of it is it's kind of like taking the paint off, effectively. Thinning the paint down and taking some of it off. Okay, so now I'm looking at different parts, and then we'll carry on. Move on to the hand and the arm. But that blue is so striking. I love Talassar Blue. It's such a nice blue colour. It's very vivid blue, admittedly, but it's a lovely blue. And we continue to finish off. I'm just leaving a little bit there. Basically, this kind of ligaments, I guess you can call them, connecting his inner arm. I'm going to take them as wood. Okay, so I'm going to use wood as the example for those. And my thinking was, rather than bone, I wanted it to be kind of like different parts other than just skeleton bones, connecting this ice construct together. So I wanted to use some wood on that part. I'm just again taking away some of the paint and thinning it down with the contrast medium. And here is the effect you can see, and this will show it. I took a bit too much paint away from that one, but as you can see, as I start to go over them, you start to take away some of that paint. I guess it's like anti-dry brushing. You're taking the paint away rather than. The problem with that hand was I let it dry too much, So when I went just over it there, it was literally taking the paint off in parts rather than thinning it down. Okay, let's continue with the rest of the miniature now. Putting the rest of the blue on. But again, what I absolutely love about contrast paints is the immediate effect you see when you paint with them. Like this, for example. I mean, you are literally seeing the ice grow as you paint through the miniature, and I absolutely love that about Citadel Contrast paints. They are great. You know, I took a bit of time on this because I really wanted it to kind of work, and I wanted to make sure I was doing the medium before the paint had dried. So that hand I was so much more pleased with that hand compared to the other one because I hadn't let the paint dry. So again, you're going to see me stopping painting the blue periodically while I apply the medium to give that ice effect. And again, everything, all the sections which are sped up are 4 times speed. So in with the medium here, and again, just taking away some of the paint on the highlighted areas. And really, really pleased with the effect. Now we're going around the middle where you've got the skeletons kind of like forming the top half of the body for this thing. And I'll tell you what, the sculpting on the back is brilliant. It's all like cracked ice. It's fantastic. That spine I decided was going to be like ice shards rather than metal or something like that. So that's why it's gone blue. It's a big area that I'm covering here. So just covering that. But before it dried, I want to make sure I go over that. So again, hitting the back, the spines with that. And you can see how it lightens the area. So I was really pleased with the back. The back, I think, is worked so well. It's exactly what I was after. The front, I do a few extra bits towards the end of the video. And I really didn't use this blue enough, to be honest. But there we go. So we're going around what looks like a kind of mammoth tusk type thing. Head, bone. And then we're going around there. Now I do go over the bone a bit here, but it's just a matter of you know, touching up, which I'll do in a bit. Also, I'm making sure I clean the brush part way through, so that the paint doesn't dry on the brush, which will ruin your brush if you let it. So it's important to keep cleaning your brush in between painting sections, as it were. Just painting around the sword, around the bone that was the rib cage that's on the top. And we're getting close to finishing the blue. We go in with the medium here. And this is the section I should have used a bit more medium on. It's okay, I'm happy with it, but it could have been done more to just make that lighter, where the light would shine onto the top, making that lighter. But there we go. There it is in all its glory. And I'm just adding a little bit of the kind of watered down blue to the bits that I took too much paint off, because I still want them to have a blue shine. I don't want them to be completely white. But yeah, that took a while. That did take a while. I'm not going to lie. When you consider how much of that was 4 times sped up, that took a decent amount of time. In terms of the complete paint, I think it took 1 hour and 45 minutes to do both, but I did manage to finish the bases. So that's without the bases. So you're really looking at 1 hour a miniature, it seems, so far. I've got some big miniatures to go yet. So Kitsune, she has got some skin tone. So I'm going in with Guilliman flesh here. I'm just going in between the gauntlets and kind of like the under of the shoulder pads, I guess you can call them. That's also skin tone as well. So I'm just doing a first run across this. And I do love Guilliman flesh. I think it's such a nice. It's not very dark toned skin. So I've literally just bought. I think it's Fire Slayer flesh. I've just bought a new contrast paint to get some more tonal differences in the skin tone. So I went with Fire Slayer flesh, which is a darker skin tone. So that would be a good one to use. Okay, so just doing under the arm of the armpit of the other arm. And then I realise, hang on, the hands also have got some exposed flesh. So looking at the card art. But she's got kind of like fist kind of pads going around, so it's not the entire of our hand showing. And again, I don't want to have to go over the whole hand and then have to touch it up and everything else. So just making sure I've covered all the bits I need to with this flesh tone. Guilliman flesh. But absolutely beautiful, intricate design model. Fantastic dynamic pose. Leaping in the air. I have talked to as well that arm down the bottom, her right arm, is quite fragile. That's the only problem with this sculpt, is I see that breaking potentially relatively easy. Okay, so that's the arms done, nearly. I'm just making sure I've got the skin tone all the way in to where it needs to be, so just running that brush around. And I plan to paint Bronte very soon, and he's got a lot of flesh showing. And his miniature will really highlight this Guilliman flesh. Or the Fire Slayer, I haven't decided which one I'm going to use yet. So now the feet are exposed as well. Nice and easy to do this foot, because it's suspended in mid-air, which always helps. The other foot though is kind of moulded onto the tail, and to be honest, it wasn't very clear in terms of the mould. So a little bit of freehand here in terms of where I thought the foot would be. But what a beautiful sculpt. I just love that they've used the tails to show motion in the character itself. So that's the skin tone done. So now moving onto Leviadon Blue, which is a new contrast paint I've literally just bought. It's a dark blue. It's a very nice dark rich blue. We're going to do all of her clothing, her blue clothing, if you looked at the card art. So that's trousers as well as a little bit on the top as well. So I'm still using my size 0 here for the time being, but I will switch to my 000 more detail brush, especially to get in between certain areas. I also realised that I've got a holder, which this space is not that big, so I can actually get the holder in. And for me, it just makes life so much easier. You can manipulate around. As you can see what I'm doing here, you can turn it upside down, really just almost get the miniature to stay in the same place, and then I can go in. Sorry about this, my hand going over the top. So for some parts, it's important that I do that. I'm just doing the top there. And now the rest of the legs. She's got some throwing daggers that are attached to both legs. So I'm just going around those. And then I say, right, I need a bit more detail, a bit more control. So this is the Klinsky Masterclass from Army Painter. And I'm just going inside of the armour here. Again, sorry, you can't see that. And just in between the throwing daggers themselves and the areas near the tail as well. Just to make sure I've got full control in getting over that. And there you can see that it's kind of like a slight purple tinge to it. It's a really nice dark velvety blue. Okay. Whoop. So now we've done the blue. We need to move on to the next thing, which is the tails. And in the art, they're kind of quite red in terms of the ends of the tails, and I wanted it to be a bit like an English red fox, which actually is like a deep orange. So I wanted it to go for an orange look. So Gryph Hound Orange is the next Citadel Contrast paint. I'm just adjusting the camera because I felt like I was going off to the left a lot. So to try and centralise the miniature, I moved the camera down there. So placing it on and trying to make a kind of swirl shape, quite a definite swirl shape, to try and match the card art as best I could on that much depth of detail. But as you can see, it's a really nice vibrant orange. And then here I'm trying to just shape it a little bit. Okay, so then we do... Oh, that was just finishing that one off, by the way. So now, we move on to the next tail, do the same. And just spending a little bit extra time just to make sure I get that kind of clean lines, or cleanish lines, between where the orange meets the white, the Apothecary white. Obviously the Apothecary white is completely dry, so you're not getting any mixing between the two. Now if you wanted, you could blend this in, admittedly. You could use a bit of medium to pretty much wet blend the orange into the white. So that is definitely an option, but just with the card art and everything, I think it's got a bit more of a definite line to it. So there's the tails, and I'm really pleased with the fact I used orange. I think it just gives that uniqueness of the red fox. So we finished the tails, and the next part to do, I believe, is a bit of touch up. So I'm going to get the Rathbone, and this is not actually for so much for Kitsune. So what I've noticed here is on the heel of the foot, I've got a bit of that blue. So I'm just going in with the Rathbone base, and I'm making sure that I don't just do a splodge. So I just pass over the whole of the kind of highlights of the heel with the Rathbone. So when I do put the Guilliman flesh, it kind of gives it a natural look. It doesn't look like just a dot that's been redone. So I'm just saying the rest of the miniature needs to be silver armour. It's got some lovely texture on the back, which is her armour. So I kind of want that to be done with the silver or the Leadbelcher. So we move on to our construct again, Altaua, and I realise I've painted over a fair few of the bones with the blue. So we're going back to that Rathbone base, and don't need much. Really don't need much. Make sure you water it down every time you use these paints. So anytime you don't use contrast, make sure you use a little bit of water to help it flow. And I'm just going back over, you know, the bone parts that I actually want bone coloured before I apply the skeleton horde. So it's not huge amounts, but there certainly are some areas that needed doing. And that, you know, that paint, that Rathbone base is a decent paint. It'll cover most things. That's good. And then I was thinking, right, those skeletons at the front really need doing, as well as the top part with the what do you call it, the rib cage. And I think we go on to the faces and the rib cage in the middle. They just need a little bit of work done on. And obviously if you ensure you keep it quite wet, the paint, then your brush is going to have a nice point and it'll work. You do not want dry paint when you're trying this. Okay, so we're just touching up that construct just before we start applying all the bone skeleton horde to it. Oops. Okay, so back to Kitsune. And just thinking about what's next. I think we're going with the Wyldwood now to do the kind of head cloak, or the hood, and the headdress, and some belts as well, just to do the brown work, as well as the holsters for the throwing daggers. So going in with a small brush here because I don't want to ruin the work that I've done already, and it's relatively detailed work, so just being a little bit careful with this, especially around the hood. We want that to be correct, to be good. But this brown is a lovely, Wyldwood is a lovely brown. It gives a nice deep, rich brown finish, which is perfect for this model. And I noticed there's some detail on the hood there, which in a reflection is going to be done with Leadbelcher anyway, so that can go over that paint anyway. So I probably didn't need to be so careful with that. Now the strapping around her top. And around her belt, kind of like this sash. And then the holster of the throwing daggers. And the strap that goes around the leg. And it is important to use the more detailed brush here because I don't want to get anything on the tail. I don't want to get anything on the blue clothing that I've just done. So just trying to be neat here. But the poses the miniatures starting to really pop out now as we start to get the colour onto it. I'm getting really pleased with how this one's looking. Oops. And just making sure I'm all okay just to get the metalwork on in a minute. Okay, so that's that bit done. So that's her brown done, and I unlocked her on the floor. And I was pleased to see that she didn't break, which is a good test. So that was good, but nearly a disaster. So now we go back to the construct, Altaua, and now we're going to go in with the skeleton horde. So the wraith bone I touched up with has dried. It doesn't take too long to dry. And now we get this skeleton horde. I'm going over all of the bone work now. And again, a bit like the Apothecary white, when you put it on at first you think, my god, that's going to be so dark. It's not going to look right at all. But it really does dry well. I think when it gets into the recesses, it really starts to work well. And then, obviously, if you've got ribs and things, it's so good because it literally just goes into those recesses and it gives you a really nice effect. Unfortunately, another lid doesn't stay open. I think it's at this stage now that I realise I've painted blue over one of the tusks of this construct, which I will sort out later. Again, not using tons and tons of paint, just using enough to go over it. I'm leaving a few bits, you noticed, because I realise that they are actually ice crystals and not parts of the bone. So I'm leaving those ready to go over with the blue. And that's what I'm saying. That's the bit that I missed. Just checking if there's any more bone. Not seeing any, so I think that's the skeleton horde done. So after the skeleton horde, just making sure my brush is clean. And it gives a really nice contrast to the ice. I love how the bone contrasts with the ice. I mean, I'm sure you can paint shades to show that it's kind of semi-translucent. That'd be cool. What am I going on in here? Oh, right, I'm going back to the Wyldwood to do the handle of the sword here. And as with all of this, it's all just one coat and done. That's the beauty of Citadel Contrast paints. Is if you're relatively careful, it's one coat and you're done. Also, I'm going into the inner arms here to show those kind of like wooden planks or wooden beams that are stuck into the construct's arms, which cause it to move its arms and lift weights. And just being careful not to go on the blue here. So I think that's just the aim of the day, is just try and be a little bit careful, especially as you're applying the darker colours. And then you should be fine. There we go. So that's the wood done on the construct, which is good. So that's that bit done. So he's ready for his metal work. So we need to go back to Kitsune, and we've got to do the last part before her metal work, which is using black Templar. Oh, hang on. Oh no, I know. I missed her face. So her face, I realised at the bottom of the mask, has actually got her face shown. So that's what I'm doing there. Okay, so it's hard to see on the camera, but effectively what you've got this this jaw showing through with the skin tone. Just make sure I haven't forgotten anything else. Okay, so now we'll go straight to the Leadbelcher. That's it. So now we're gonna do the metal work. And I did get a new Leadbelcher, so when this one's run out, I'm okay, which is good. Make sure you water down your Leadbelcher, or it's not going to be able to get painted on very easily at all. And then we're going to do all of the metal parts of the miniature. So starting with the sword, then moving on to all the armour. So that's going to be the gauntlets and the leg armour. Obviously making sure not to go through on any of the painted parts of the miniature, like skin and everything else, because it will really show up. It'll be really unnoticeable. So it's just taking your time on this metal stage, making sure that you are careful and precise. I'm just using my size 0 brush here. So they're pretty decent sized miniatures, and pretty decent sized areas you've got to paint. So we go on to the arm gauntlets. Again, just taking care when I'm getting close to the edges of those. But literally the whole gauntlet's painted in that metal. You got the sword. Make sure you get that pommel. And the back. So her back's got plenty of armour to paint. The top half and the bottom half. Now any bits that your Leadbelcher misses, when you go over them with Basilicanum Grey, it'll fill in the blanks. So it's not huge if you miss bits off at all. It's not huge at all, actually. So these are the knees now that I'm going in there with, and the lower leg armour. And when I do this, I realise that I've not painted the blue all the way in on that leg, so that's going to need doing. Just being very careful not to hit the bits that I painted, because then that would have to be a redo, which I didn't want to do. Go into the smaller brush to get the finer details, the throwing daggers, the trim of the leg armour, and the helmet, not helmet, the headpiece as well. Now we're going on to the blue construct at Lua, and we're doing the same thing again, making sure it's plenty watered down, but not. You don't want it to wash. You don't want a metal wash. You do certainly want it some water onto it to help it flow. That's kind of essential. I'm doing all of the bits, all the chains that have just caught up in this elemental, which is a fair amount of them actually. Some around his chest, some just hanging out bits of his body. Some of them dragging along the floor. Swords, obviously. And that thing towards his backside is I decided was an axe actually, because of the way it was modelled. I thought it was a chain at first, but then I decided, you know what, we're making an axe. Finishing the sword. And just making sure there's no white bits as best I can. And there you go. That's the construct done in terms of just Leadbelcher base. So just doing the headpiece now. So the hood has got some metal or silver detail. So get my 000 size brush here just to go over those particular parts. Again, it's been modelled fantastically. So you don't have to freehand it. You just look to see where the raised areas are, and it gives you the detail, which is, I really do appreciate that. It makes it so much easier to paint. Okay, so there's still a bit of white on Kitsune, and that's basically the handles of her swords and her hair. So looking at the card art, I see that it basically, for both of those things, it's black, and a fantastic paint from Citadel is Black Templar. This is a great contrast paint, a kind of essential in the range. It gives I think it gives a fantastic black coating. Kind of a slightly blue or night shade, I guess, black as it were, but a lovely black. That and white, the black and the white are fantastic, absolutely fantastic contrast paints. So finishing the handles of the sword, again being very careful not to go over all the hand and everything that I've spent a while painting, using my 000 brush just to make sure I'm hitting the right parts. And you know, it's just taking your time. And remember, if you keep in the back of your mind, it's a one coat, one coat, one coat. That's the best way it works. And then now we're going on to the hair. Then, you know, just be that little bit extra careful, spend a little extra time, which will save you plenty of time in the long run. I think that's the key. So, in terms of the skill set for and the skill level for contrast paints, I think you can go on it very low skill, as your first painting. but you just need to take your time and be aware that you're going to make mistakes. But as you start to use them more and more and become a bit more experienced as a painter, you'll speed up your painting no end. You know, I found that the quality of the final piece is so good for how much time I spent on the miniatures. You know, painting traditional paints and traditional techniques takes a long time. It gives fantastic results, don't get me wrong. You know, if you do your base colours, then you do your washes, then you do your kind of layering, it gives fantastic results, but my word, does it take a long time. And when I've got these 72 new miniatures to paint, I've still got one super fancy brawl miniature to paint, so that should just be one more night. But then my other Kickstarter's coming through eventually. I'm thinking I really want to get ahead of the game and try and get this done. By the way, here I'm just touching up the bits that I missed, the few little icicles that I missed. And I didn't really use the medium that much. I should have used that more and got it a bit lighter on those parts, because they're the bits I'm not so keen on. Basilicanum Grey now, to go over the metalwork. So what you do is you just literally grab some Basilicanum Grey and you go over them. And it just gives a very realistic metal look. I love this technique. I've said this many times. I think I've pretty much said it on every single video I do with contrast paints, because you take the time painting the metal base, the Leadbelcher base, but then this is a quick step, and the results are so satisfying. The metals really do come out looking like metals, and you can use different colours for different types of metals. So here, Basilicanum Grey is great for silver colours. You can use Iyanden Yellow for gold, which I do with Kitsune's sword eventually. You can use that Gryph Hound Orange for copper. So you can get all these different tones as well, just using different tones of contrast paint. You can add some medium to make it lighter. You can mix the colours. You can do anything. The world's your oyster with that metal technique. Okay, so now what are we doing now? Carrying on Basilicanum Grey, I think, onto Kitsune now. So legs first. Again, you got to still be careful with this because you don't want to get it over the skin tone, because that would be a disaster. So just making sure, just being a little bit careful with this, not to get it over anything that I've painted so far, because that would be a bit of a disaster. I've been painting for after painting those layers and being really happy with them, it would be a shame to have to repaint them. Gauntlets, same idea. Arm shoulder pads, the back, and now the lower part. Because when you put the Leadbelcher on at first, it looks very much like a plasticky metal. You know, like the silver plastic you get on toys. So it doesn't look great. It looks cheap. It looks a bit rubbish. And traditionally you use a little bit of Nuln Oil over the top of it, which works fine. But I just found Basilicanum Grey contrast over the top of metal gives a much more realistic metal effect. Just Guilliman flesh to go over that bit I touched up on her heel, on her left foot. There we go, so that was a little touch up. So just have a little look at her now, seeing what else I need to do. And I noticed on the art, go. So I noticed on the art that the tails have got like a blackened end that fades into the red, well, the red of the card art, but the orange in my case. So 2 brushes now. I've got one black Templar and then one with the medium. Now, fortunately, both of these lids stay open, so that's a good thing. Put some black Templar on the tip of the tail. And then with the other brush, grab some contrast medium. And then kind of going into the black Templar and spreading it and try and give it a gradient. So you do that by pushing up into the tip, because that's where you want it to pull, as it were. Okay, so up into the tip is what I do. So get it. Try and get rid of that hard line that would form when you do a drip of black Templar, and use the contrast medium to blend that away. So it's wet blending really, to spread that dark blackness around the tail and give it a kind of gradient. Don't be afraid to keep adding on and spreading and adding on and spreading. It's like, at the end of the day, it's only a medium, like water, so it's not gonna affect your miniature too much. So just the black Templar onto the tip, and then spread it using the medium. Okay, so just checking, make sure we're all good. And then we're going to move on back to Skeleton Horde for the bits that I touched up on the construct, Ataluna, which is basically the tusk that was kind of hidden in the ice. And you know, when you paint, you'll do things like this. So as you're painting one colour, you go, I missed that bit, or that needs changing, and then just go and do it after you've done that little section. I think it's important. Now I'm using a little bit of the black Templar to just go on the base of the tusks, which I'm going to then use the contrast medium to spread up the tusks, and this is to give it a bit of a more realistic ivory look. Okay, so kind of like painted a ring around the base of the actual tusk itself, and then grab the contrast medium and blend that down the tusk. And that just makes it look a little bit more realistic. It's a quick touch, but it's a good touch. And on the other one as well. There we go. Because you want that blended gradient, that soft blend. You don't want hard lines. And that's what contrast medium can do. Just make sure you do it before the paint's dried, or it won't work. Okay, I think the construct Altaua is now complete. In fact, nearly both are complete. I realised that Kitsune actually has a golden pommel on her swords. But before that, just referencing the card art now, just making sure I've hit everything. I'm really happy with the ice effect that's come out on the Altaua, the construct here. Look at the back, especially the back. The front could have been better. Front could have been slightly better with a bit more contrast medium on the top. But yeah, and this is what I'm talking about here. That didn't record, is that if I put more contrast medium where the light was shining on the top, it would have perhaps given a better effect. I still really like the outcome. I think it could be a little less blue and a bit more transparent looking. Kitsune, really pleased with her. She's really popped in out. I haven't done the bases, of course, of both of these yet. But then I realised that, yes, hang on, we need to do the pommels of Kitsune. They are the wrong colour. So Leadbelcher and then Iyanden Yellow over the top of it gives you gold. And a really nice gold as well. It's not super, super bright. It's kind of a realistic gold. So just, again, being a little bit careful, just to make sure I go over just the pommel. I don't want the yellow over the hand. That would look pretty rubbish as well. And there we go. So, pommel was the last bit. Yes, the bases need doing. But I'm going to do the bases exactly the same way as I did Ezio's. So go back and watch Ezio's video to see how I did the bases for Black Rose Wars. But I will be continuing on with that. So, that's the two models finished, as I say, except for the bases. Really pleased with how the blue construct, how vibrant it is, but it still has that that kind of ice look to it. Thanks for watching.